What if you weren't the only human, and never have been? Let's get one thing straight. This isn't just a story about the past. This is a story about you, about us. And the truth? We've been lied to. You've probably heard the simple version. Humans came, humans conquered, and now we're the last one standing. But that's only part of the story. Before we go any further, hit subscribe, because this story isn't just history, it's your story. And by the time we're done, you'll never look at being human the same way again. Because for most of our time on Earth, we weren't alone. We shared this planet with other humans. Not apes, not monsters. People, just like us, but different. In this series, we're going deep into something that history books barely mention. A forgotten chapter where 6 human species walked the Earth at the same time. Here's what you're about to watch. How many species of human really existed? Who were they? And what made them unique? What was it like when we lived side by side? And what really happened to them while we survived? You'll meet 5 of our closest cousin humans who had language, emotions, culture, and dreams. Some were strong, some were small, some were mysterious. One of them had brains just as big as ours, and yet they all disappeared, and we didn't. In each episode, we'll explore one of these extinct human species. We'll show you what they looked like, how they lived, what they believed in, and maybe how they died. But this isn't just about bones and fossils. This is about us, because their story didn't end when they vanished. They live on in our DNA. You right now carry pieces of them in your body. They're part of your bloodline, your biology, your story. So this series isn't just, look at these ancient weirdos. This is about family, about what it means to be human, about how close we came to not making it. Because here's the hard truth. We weren't chosen, we were just lucky. Or maybe we were ruthless. Maybe both. So let's begin where it matters. Not with us, but with the others. You've probably heard the name Homo sapiens. That's us. But what if I told you there were 5 more? 5 human species, each with their own stories, strengths, and secrets. And we didn't just hear about them from fossils. We lived with them, walked the same paths, ate the same food, loved, fought, and feared them. This is the part school skipped. The real human origin story. Picture a family tree. At the very top you, me, us. But just a little below, it branches out. Wild, twisted, crowded. Over the past 2 million years, there were over 20 different human species. But during one overlapping moment in time, 6 of them were alive. At the same time, on the same planet. Let's break that down. Homo sapiens, that's us. The survivors, the storytellers. Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis. Stocky, powerful, deeply emotional. Europe's icy titans. Denisovans, the ghosts of Siberia. Almost nothing found, but their genes live on. Homo floresiensis, tiny humans from Indonesia, 3 feet tall, nicknamed the Hobbits. Homo luzonensis, another small-bodied species, hiding in the Philippines. Homo erectus, the OG travelers, first humans to leave Africa, built to survive. All 6 of these species were alive during a tight stretch of time early 50, 0 to 100, 0 years ago. They weren't just scattered randomly either. Some met, some mated, some fought, and some disappeared without a trace. Let's get one thing clear. These weren't dumb cavemen. Some buried their dead. Some made jewelry. Some crafted tools so advanced they shock scientists today. They had culture, language, even art. In other words, they were human, but not exactly like us. Neanderthals had bigger brains than we do. Denisovans were genetically built for high altitudes. We still don't fully know how. Homo erectus survived for nearly 2 million years. That's 10 times longer than us so far. Each species was adapted to its own world, but eventually, every single one of them vanished. All except us. Why should you care? Because this changes everything about how we see ourselves. We weren't the chosen ones. We weren't alone. We were just one of many. So when you think of ancient humans, don't imagine a lonely figure stumbling through a wasteland. Imagine a world full of us different versions, side by side. Some short, some tall, some strong, some smart. And somehow, through chaos, climate, and competition, we're the only ones left. But maybe not forever. They weren't just like us. In some ways, they were better. They stood in the cold, fierce winds of Ice Age, Europe, broad shoulders, heavy brows, and eyes that held stories we'll never fully understand. For decades, we laughed at them. Neanderthal became an insult. But now that the science has caught up, the joke's on us. Because these so-called cavemen, they built fires. They cared for their sick. They buried their dead. And they might have loved deeper than we ever knew. Let's rewind. Neanderthals emerged around 400 years ago, spreading across Europe and parts of Western Asia, built like tanks shorter than us, but wider, stronger, and tougher. They were perfectly evolved for cold climates, barrel-chested, with big noses that warmed icy air before it hit their lungs. They didn't just survive the cold, they thrived in it. Their tools were precise, not primitive. Flint blades, scrapers, even wooden spears. Some carved patterns into bones, maybe art, maybe ritual. That's still debated. But one thing's clear. They weren't just about brute force. They looked after injured tribe members. Not for days, for years. Scientists found skeletons with major injuries, broken legs, fused joints, even blindness. No way those people survived alone. Which means the group stuck with them, helped them eat, move, live. That's empathy. That's connection. That's family. And they mourned. We've found Neanderthal graves. Shallow, simple, but purposeful. Some even show signs of flowers laid near the body. That doesn't sound like a soulless beast to me. That sounds like a human heart, grieving. And, get this, they might have had music. A bone flute, found in Slovenia, is still being debated. But even if it's not proof of song, it shows something deeper. Curiosity, creativity. But for all their strength and soul, they vanished. Around 40 years ago, they were gone. What happened? Wellus. Homo sapiens entered Europe about 10 years before Neanderthals went extinct. We were leaner, more agile. We had stronger trade networks, maybe better communication, or maybe just more of us. There wasn't some epic war. It wasn't Neanderthals versus sapiens in a fight to the death. But we slowly outcompeted them, took over their hunting grounds, outnumbered them in children, in firewood, in food. Some of us even mated with them. Today, if you're from Europe or Asia, up to 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. That's not a myth, that's your ancestors meeting theirs. So think about this. You carry the echoes of Neanderthals. Not just bones in a cave. Not just museum fossils. But real people. Still living inside your genes. They had voices. Laughter. Fears. Dreams. They were human. Just a different kind. And in their story, we don't just find a mirror, we find a warning. Because if the strongest humans of their time could disappear, what makes us think we're invincible? You're about to meet a species so so mysterious. We've never even seen their faces. No skulls, no full skeletons, just a finger bone, a few teeth, and strands of ancient DNA. Yet somehow they're inside you. Rewind to 2008. A cave in the mountains of Siberia. A team of scientists uncovers a tiny fragment of pinky bone, buried deep in the Denisova cave. At first, no one thinks much of it. Just another Neanderthal fossil, right? Wrong. When they ran the DNA, the results shocked the world. This wasn't a Neanderthal, and it wasn't Homo sapiens. It was something else entirely. A lost species, one we'd never seen before. They named them after the cave, Denisovans. And that's where the mystery begins. We still don't know exactly what they looked like. But what we do know, it's wild. Denisovans weren't rare. They were spread out from Siberia to Southeast Asia to the Pacific Islands. That's a massive range. And get this, modern humans didn't just cross paths with them. We interbred. That means they're still here, in us. If you've got ancestry from Asia, Oceania, or indigenous Australia, you've probably got up to 5% Denisovan DNA in your body right now. Not just random genes, these are super genes. One Denisovan gene helps people thrive at high altitudes like the Tibetans living on the roof of the world. That's not just evolution, that's genetic teamwork across species. But what were these people like? We know they shared some features with Neanderthal strong builds, large teeth, powerful hands. But they also had traits we've never seen in any other species. A Denisovan molar found in Laos? It was huge, way bigger than a modern human's. Like something from a different branch of the human tree entirely. And still we've never found a full skull, no full body. It's like they lived in the shadows, then vanished without a trace. But not before leaving their mark. Their DNA shows up in places thousands of miles apart. And that means one thing. They were explorers. They crossed rivers, climbed mountains, spread across continents. No maps, no language as we know it. Just instinct, courage, and the will to push beyond the horizon. So why are they gone? The truth is, we don't really know. It wasn't a single event. It might have been competition, climate, or just getting absorbed into us. Because when Homo sapiens moved into their territory, we mixed, we merged. And in a way, the Denisovans didn't die out. They became part of us. Ghosts in the genome. Not forgotten, just hidden. Here's what makes them terrifying and fascinating all at once. We know so little about them. But they're inside millions of us. They shaped our bodies, changed our biology, and yet their faces are lost to time. How many more are out there species we've never named, never studied, never imagined? Denisovans are just the beginning. Because the deeper we dig, the more we realize we were never alone. Before us, before Neanderthals, before Denisovans, there was Homo erectus. These weren't just early humans. They were the original pioneers, the first of our kind to truly dominate the world. We're talking about a species that didn't just survive, they thrived for nearly 2 million years. That's tanks longer than we've been around. So yeah, they were doing something right. It all started in Africa, around 2 million years ago. And Homo erectus wasted no time. They packed up, hit the road, and spread across continents long before maps, GPS, or even language. They walked into Asia, down into Indonesia, even made it to Europe. Imagine crossing thousands of miles of harsh terrain, wild predators, and unpredictable climates. On foot, no shoes, no tools except stone hand axes. These weren't just survivors, they were explorers. But here's the twist. Homo erectus was also the first species to master fire. That's right, they lit the first flames. Let that sink in. Fire changed everything. It meant warmth in the cold. It meant light in the dark. It meant cooking, meat unlocking calories, and nutrients no other animal could tap into. It even kept predators away at night. With fire, Homo erectus could go places no human had ever dared. It was the spark, literally, that ignited the path to modern civilization. And physically, these folks weren't hunched over cavemen. They stood tall, walked upright, had long legs built for endurance. Basically, they were built like marathon runners. Not sprinters, but distance kings. They could outwalk predators, outlast prey, outrun the storm. Their brains weren't as big as ours, but they were growing. Each generation saw a little more brain power. And that brain? It gave rise to social living, working together, sharing knowledge, passing down skills. The tribe became the engine of survival. So why don't we talk about them more? Because they didn't just vanish overnight. They slowly faded out, replaced by newer, sharper species. But their legacy? Oh, it runs deep. Their tools were the foundation of every human invention to come. Their migration paths shaped the future of every species that followed. And that fire? It still burns. Every match you strike, every candle you light, every time you sit around a campfire, you're echoing something. Homo erectus started 1.5 million years ago. Here's the real kicker. Some scientists think they may have lasted until as recently as 100 years ago. That means they might have coexisted with early Homo sapiens. Imagine bumping into one. Not a caveman, but a rough, rugged, intelligent human. A shadow of our past, staring back with fire-lit eyes. Homo erectus wasn't just a species. They were the blueprint, the bridge between the wild and the human. The reason we made it out of the Stone Age. Without them, there's no us. Burial. In pitch black. By a species with a brain the size of an orange. Yeah. You read that right. Homo naledi might be the strangest human ancestor we've uncovered, and honestly, no one fully knows what to make of them. Back in 2013, deep inside the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, scientists stumbled onto something wild. Over 500 bones from at least 15 individuals. The twist? These remains were found in a pitch-black chamber, over 30 meters underground. No signs of predation, no signs of accidental death. They were placed there, on purpose. Homo naledi was burying their dead. Let that sink in. This was once thought to be a behavior exclusive to Homo sapiens and Neanderthal species, with big brains, complex societies, and symbolic thinking. But naledi? Their brains were tiny, about 450 to 610 cc. That's 1/3 the size of ours. And yet, they were doing something deeply human. Creepy? A bit. Fascinating? Absolutely. Homo naledi stood about 5 feet tall, with curved fingers perfect for climbing. They had small, lightweight frame sagittal, and likely adapted to both trees and rough terrain. They lived roughly 240, 0 to 335, 0 years ago. That means they existed around the same time as early Homo sapiens in Africa. So yes, we were neighbors. But they weren't quite like us. They mixed ancient traits, like a small brain and primitive hips, with more modern ones, like human-like feet and hands. Almost like a mashup between Australopithecus and Homo erectus. They were a puzzle and still are. Let's talk about that cave again. The Dinaledi chamber isn't easy to reach. Even experienced cavers struggle. So how did Naledi carry dead bodies deep inside without light or gear? Some scientists suggest maybe a natural trap, like they fell in, But here's the kicker. There are no marks on the bones suggesting a fall or trauma. And no animal bones either. Only Homo naledi, arranged in what looks eerily close to intentional placement. Were they honoring the dead? Performing rituals? We don't know. But the evidence is stacking up in favor of behavior we thought only modern humans were capable of. Which begs the question, did intelligence always need a big brain? Naledi throws a wrench into everything we thought we knew. If a small-brained species was performing complex burial practices, what else were they capable of? It challenges our ego. It tells us that consciousness, community, maybe even spirituality, didn't evolve in a straight line. Maybe it wasn't about brain size, but how they used it. And that opens doors we've never considered. Homo naledi isn't just another fossil in a museum. They're a bold reminder that we aren't the only ones who felt, thought, remembered, or even mourned. In the darkest corners of the earth, they left behind a mystery that still haunts science today. One thing's for sure. They weren't simple cave dwellers. They were storytellers in the dark, writing their legacy in silence. Time to flip the script. Because this next species, they weren't big. They weren't strong. They didn't have giant brains. But they were weirdly brilliant, and they defied every rule in the human playbook. Welcome to the world of Homo floresiensis, aka the hobbits of human history. Picture this. It's 2003. A remote cave on the island of Flores, Indonesia. Archaeologists are digging, expecting to find fossils from modern humans. But what they uncover blows every theory wide open. A skull the size of a grapefruit. A tiny body, just over 3 feet tall. It wasn't a child. It wasn't diseased. It was an entirely new species of human unknown until that moment. Boom! Homo floresiensis enters the game. These hobbits lived about 0 to 50 years ago. And yeah, we're not kidding about the size. They were mini humans, probably weighing 25-30 kilograms max. But here's the crazy part. Despite their small stature and shockingly small brains, they used tools like pros, stone blades, spears, hunting traps. They knew fire. They ate meat steak, wasn't off the table. And they were thriving in total isolation. On an island, cut off from the rest of the world. For possibly over 1 million years. Let that sink in. While the rest of humanity was evolving, migrating, and building civilizations, these little legends were just vibing in a jungle cave, living life on hard mode and winning. Now here's where it gets even wilder. No other human species lived like them. They shrank over generations, a process known as island dwarfism, an evolutionary survival hack where limited resources and few predators make smaller bodies more efficient. Elephants turned into pygmy elephants on Flores. Big lizards became Komodo dragons. And Homo erectus, the fire starters we talked about, may have gotten stranded here and shrank into Homo floresiensis. Talk about evolution doing a plot twist. But don't mistake their size for weakness. These hobbits were smart enough to adapt to island life. They hunted small animals, cooked their food, and built communities. Their brains were about 1/3 the size of ours, but somehow they pulled it off. It's a direct slap in the face to the idea that bigger brain equals more advanced. Clearly, nature had other plans. Now here's the big question. Did they meet us? Homo sapiens reached Southeast Asia around 50 years ago. Same time these hobbits were still around. So yeah, it's very possible we crossed paths. One species towering over the other. One rewriting history, the other becoming it. There's even local folklore on Flores about small, hairy people called the Abu Gogo who lived in the mountains and stole food from villagers. Coincidence? Or whispers of a forgotten encounter? Sadly, like so many other human cousins, Homo floresiensis vanished. Maybe climate change. Maybe we wiped them out. Maybe they just couldn't keep up with a rapidly shifting world. But they left behind something powerful. Proof that there's more than one way to be human. That intelligence doesn't need size. That strength isn't always loud. That sometimes the smallest players leave the biggest mysteries. Just when you thought the map of ancient humans was complete, the Philippines whispered a secret, and it changed everything. Let's rewind to 2007. A cave deep in the rainforests of Luzon. A team of scientists digging through layers of history. They uncover a single foot bone, tiny, mysterious. And then, more bones. Teeth, fingers, a few fragments. But what they all scream is the same. This is not Homo sapiens. And it's not Neanderthal, not Denisovan, not Floresiensis. It's something completely different. Say hello to Homo luzonensista, phantom humans of Southeast Asia. Now, here's the thing. These fossils were over 0 years old. That means they were alive at the same time as us. And possibly alongside the hobbits of Flores, just a few islands away. Yeah, multiple human species were thriving in island jungles, while the rest of us were still figuring out how to hunt without stabbing ourselves. Wild, right? But Homo luzonensis is still a mystery box. Why? Because we've barely found them. Just 13 bones. No skull. No full skeleton. Just whispers of a species that shouldn't exist, but does. Here's where it gets even more nuts. Their teeth? Totally different. Primitive in some ways, like those of Australopithecus, our ancient African ancestors. Their toe bones, curved like a tree climber. Yeah, you heard that right. A human species living 0 years ago, with features that belong to something from 2 million years ago, possibly climbing trees and surviving in isolation. How? It's like evolution left a time traveler on Luzon. So what does that mean for our story? It means humans weren't just evolving in a straight line. We weren't becoming smarter and stronger in some clean upward curve. Nope. It was messy, branchy, wild. And Homo luzonensis is one of those unexpected branches we never saw coming. A small-bodied, possibly tree-dwelling hominin living in thick forests on an island that requires crossing open sea to reach. That's right. Just like the hobbits of Flores, someone in this lineage was smart enough to cross water. Think about that. They didn't have boats. They didn't have maps. But they made it to Luzon. They survived. They adapted. And they stayed hidden for tens of thousands of years. The bigger question, did they meet us? Absolutely possible. Homo sapiens were in the Philippines around 0 years ago. That's the same layer these bones were found in. So maybe we met. Maybe we hunted them. Maybe we interbred. Or maybe we never noticed them at all. Like shadows in the forest, living their own story out of sight, until they faded into legend. And here's the final twist. Some scientists think Homo luzonensis might have come from Homo erectus, just like Floresiensis. If true, it means these early humans didn't just survive. They spread. They evolved differently on every island. They became something new. Each time. That's not just rare. It's revolutionary. We thought we had the whole cast. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Floresiensis, Luzonensis. But turns out, that was just the trailer. The real story? It's still unfolding inside us. Let's talk about ghosts. Not the spooky kind. We mean ghost species, ancient humans we never found, but whose DNA still lives inside us. Yeah, there are people alive today, walking around with genetic fingerprints from humans we've never discovered. Let that sink in. Here's how we figured it out. Geneticists were running tests, mapping out modern human genomes. They already knew we had Neanderthal DNA. Denisovan too, no surprise there. But then something weird popped up. In parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, they found chunks of DNA that didn't match any known human species. It was like stumbling across footprints in a desert, with no one around to leave them. This mystery DNA, it didn't match sapiens, didn't match Neanderthal, didn't match Denisovan, didn't match any fossils we've ever found. It was totally unknown, and yet it was clearly human. So what does this mean? It means ancient humans were way more diverse than we imagined. It means there were likely other species out there, living alongside us, maybe even before us, who we never discovered, because their bones turned to dust, or they lived in places where fossilization was impossible. Or we just haven't dug deep enough yet, but their DNA survived. In us. Think about the implications. Every time you look in the mirror, you're not just seeing you. You're seeing thousands of ancestors, some we've never even named. You might be carrying genes from a human lineage that no archaeologist has ever touched. No skull, no tools, no cave paintings. Just a few strands of ancient code, hidden in your blood. Now here's the kicker. These ghost lineages, they didn't just contribute random scraps of DNA. Some of them might have passed on genes that helped us survive, resist diseases, adapt to heat or cold, handle high altitudes, or even shape how our brains work. In other words, these mysterious humans might have changed us forever. So where are they? That's the million-year question. Some might have lived in Central Africa, a region full of dense jungle where bones don't last. Others could have roamed islands that are now underwater places, lost to rising seas. Or they might have existed for a blink in time, long enough to mate with our ancestors and vanish. No caves, no bones, just echoes in our DNA. The truth? We're still discovering who we are. And every genome we sequence, every fossil we dig up, brings us one step closer. But one thing's clear. We're not just Homo sapiens. We're a mosaic of ancient humans, some known, some lost, some waiting to be found. Okay, stop scrolling. This is where the line between science fiction and real science starts to blur, and it gets crazy real fast. You've heard of bringing back woolly mammoths, right? CRISPR, DNA editing, frozen tissue samples. Cool, but what if we aimed higher? What if we brought back Neanderthals? Not just in a lab dish, but walking, breathing, thinking Neanderthals. Sound insane? Well, buckle up. Let's break it down. To bring a species back from extinction, scientists need three things: good DNA samples, a close living relative, a viable way to grow the organism. We already have those for Neanderthals. DNA? We've got full Neanderthal genomes mapped. Bone fragments, teeth, even some soft tissue from frozen sites. Close relative? That's us. Homo sapiens. We're as close as it gets. A way to grow a human embryo. Modern IVF and surrogacy tech is already here. So, technically speaking, resurrecting a Neanderthal is possible. Not probable. Not easy. But not off the table either. Now, before you imagine some Jurassic Park scene with Neanderthals in cages, let's talk ethics. Because this isn't reviving a mammoth to stomp around the tundra. This is bringing back a human species. That changes everything. Would they have rights? Would they be treated like humans or experiments? Would they be able to integrate into our world? And the darkest question of all, would we even deserve to bring them back? They didn't ask to be resurrected. Would it be fair to put them in a world they never belonged to? A world they didn't evolve in? With modern culture, language, cities, and tech that didn't exist in their time? Some scientists argue we shouldn't do it, because we can't guarantee they'd live a full, dignified life. Others say we must do it, because it's our duty to understand where we came from, and nothing teaches like contact. They see Neanderthals not as others, but as long-lost cousins who still have stories to tell. And here's the twist. What if they're not that different? They had families, buried their dead, used tools, maybe even created art and music. We don't know what they sounded like. But what if it was familiar? What if they looked at us, and we saw ourselves looking back? Now here's a deeper thought. We don't even need to fully resurrect them. We might be able to recreate Neanderthal traits in modern humans. Think: brain wiring, muscle structure, resistance to cold. By editing the right genes, we could engineer hybrids modern humans with ancient capabilities. Stronger, smarter in different ways, more adaptable. Sound sci-fi? Some scientists are already experimenting with these concepts in mice and organoids, mini brain cells grown from stem cells. Imagine a future where someone says, "Yeah, my kid has enhanced memory. We boosted a few Neanderthal genes." Welcome to the age of synthetic evolution. But let's pause, because at the heart of all this is a deep question. Why do we want to bring them back? Is it curiosity? Is it guilt for outliving them? Or is it hope that by meeting our ancestors face to face, we might finally understand ourselves? One thing's for sure. We're standing at the edge of something massive. A choice. Not just about what we can do, but what we should do. And if we take that step, we might not just rewrite history. We might relive it. Let's not sugarcoat it. We didn't just survive. We dominated. And if you look closely at the timeline, every other human species vanished after we showed up. Coincidence? Doubt it. Here's the hard pill to swallow. What if we didn't just outlive them? What if we wiped them out? Start with the facts. Neanderthals were thriving in Europe. Denisovans held strong in Asia. Homo floresiensis ruled a tiny island. Even Homo luzonensis had a grip on the Philippines. Then suddenly, Homo sapiens enters the scene. Within a few thousand years, every other species is gone. That's not just bad luck. That's a pattern. And history has shown us something about patterns like this. Wherever we go, others disappear. So how did we do it? Let's be real, it probably wasn't some massive war. But conquest doesn't always need a battlefield. We had something deadlier. Numbers, strategy, collaboration. While Neanderthals likely lived in smaller groups of 15, 20, Homo sapiens were rolling 100 deep, coordinated, communicating, and thinking ahead. We weren't stronger. We were smarter together. And when food got scarce, when territory was tight, it wouldn't take much. One group pushes another out. Resources dwindle. Competition spikes. One fire wins, the other flickers out. Sound familiar? That's been the human story again and again. But there's a deeper, darker possibility. What if we didn't just outcompete them? What if we actively wiped them out? Think about it. We've driven hundreds of species to extinction just in the last few centuries. Whales, wolves, tigers, entire rainforests. You think ancient humans fighting for survival would show mercy to something that looked like them, but wasn't. If you're cold, hungry, and terrified, and there's a group over the ridge using your water, your hunting ground, it's not hard to see how the unthinkable becomes inevitable. Now here's the real kicker. We might have loved them too. Sounds twisted, right? But genetic evidence shows that humans and Neanderthals interbred. We didn't just kill them, we merged with them. So while their species vanished, pieces of them live on inside us. That's the ultimate paradox. We could be the reason they're gone, but we're also the reason they're not entirely lost. Their genes are still inside billions of people today, affecting immunity, brain chemistry, even how we handle stress. It's like we absorbed them and then buried the story. Here's the truth nobody likes to face. Homo sapiens didn't just rise to the top. We took the top, by any means necessary. And that includes erasing our closest cousins. They weren't monsters. They weren't primitive. They were us, just a different version. And we couldn't let that stand. They're long gone from the earth, but not from us. Neanderthals, once painted as dumb cavemen. Now, one of the most misunderstood and most important chapters in our human story. You may think they died out, but here's the plot twist. They didn't. They live on inside us. Right now, you're likely carrying pieces of Neanderthal DNA in your body. It's not a metaphor. It's real. It's genetic. And it's affecting you more than you know. When early Homo sapiens left Africa around 60 years ago, they weren't alone for long. They came face to face with Neanderthals across Europe and Asia, two intelligent human species colliding in a brutal Ice Age world. But instead of wiping each other out immediately, something else happened first. They hooked up. A lot. Over tens of thousands of years, our ancestors interbred with Neanderthals. This wasn't a one-night stand, it happened in waves, across different regions and time periods. And every time it happened, something wild occurred. DNA got swapped. That ancient mixing is why, today, almost every person with non-African ancestry carries 3% Neanderthal DNA. Now, 3% may sound small, but we're talking about over 20 genes. That's enough to seriously impact how we function. So what exactly did we get from them? Turns out, Neanderthals were well adapted to the Ice Age world. Tougher, more resistant to local diseases, and perfectly tuned to the cold. When Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, we were the newcomers. Neanderthals had already figured out how to survive. So what happened? Natural selection kept the best of their genes. The rest faded away. But the stuff that helped us thrive? It stuck around. We inherited stronger immune responses. Some Neanderthal genes help our bodies fight off viruses more effectively, even today. Better skin and hair adaptations. Lighter skin tones helped with vitamin D absorption in low sunlight regions. Fat metabolism tweaks, useful in freezing climates, now possibly linked to modern obesity risk. They weren't just relics of a dead species. They were survival mentors, passing down tools we still use. Here's where it gets really interesting. Some of their genes are still influencing our brains. Studies have found connections between Neanderthal DNA and mood regulation, depression and anxiety, risks, pain sensitivity, sleep patterns, especially night owl behavior, even nicotine addiction tendencies. These aren't fringe theories, genetic studies back them up. Imagine that. That feeling of being wired differently? It might not just be you. It might be the echo of someone who lived 50 years ago. We outlived them, but we are them. Here's the mind blower. Neanderthals disappeared around 40 years ago. But not because they all died. They were absorbed into us. Their blood didn't vanish, it merged. That quiet guy in your office with the strong jawline and deep-set eyes? That might be Neanderthal DNA at work. Your cousin who's super sensitive to cold or burns easily in the sun. Yep, Neanderthal traits. We erased their species name, but we kept their code. We carry their legacy in skin, in bone, in thought. So next time someone tells you Neanderthals were primitive, grunting brutes, remind them, you're part Neanderthal, and without them, we may not have survived. Denisovans, you've heard the name, you've seen the cave. But what if Denisovans were more than just a footnote in human history? What if they were builders, explorers, Trader Seven kings whose empires have long crumbled into dust? Let's zoom out. While we've only found scraps of finger bone, a tooth, a bit of skull, those fragments whisper something massive. Denisovans weren't just hiding out in caves. They might have spread across vast territories, reaching from the icy tips of Siberia to the tropical edges of Southeast Asia. Some evidence even suggests they made it as far as Oceania. Hold up, how could a species so mysterious, with so little fossil proof, possibly leave such a large mark? Here's the twist. Their story isn't written in stone, it's written in us. Today, millions of people across the globe carry Denisovan DNA, up to 5% in Melanesians, smaller traces in East Asians. Even Tibetans inherited a Denisovan gene that helps them survive high altitudes. That's not random, that's impact. They left fingerprints on our blood, lungs, and evolution. So where were they all this time? The Denisovans may have been masters of adaptation. Unlike Neanderthals, who stuck to Europe and the Middle East, Denisovans seemed to thrive in scattered pockets from icy caves to island jungles. They were the quiet nomads, navigating wild terrains, leaving almost no trace behind, except for their genes. Even more shocking, they might have met and mixed with multiple human groups, including modern Homo sapiens and even Neanderthals. At one point, in that very Siberian cave, there lived a young girl with a Neanderthal mom and Denisovan dad. Think about that. These ancient humans weren't enemies locked in primal war. Sometimes they were roommates, lovers, family. And yet, for all their connections, they vanished. Why? No one knows for sure. Climate shifts, disease, or maybe they simply blended into other human groups, absorbed so completely that only their DNA remains. Whatever the cause, the empire they might have built, if it existed, collapsed into silence. But here's where the story gets even juicier. Recent studies suggest Denisovans might have been the earliest hominins to reach remote parts of Asia. Tools found in the Baixia Karst cave in Tibet, for example, hint at Denisovan activity over 160 years ago, 0 feet above sea level. That's not just surviving, that's thriving in extreme environments, something no other human species had done at that time. Add to that the possibility they reached Papua New Guinea and maybe even Australia. Now we're talking maritime skills, navigation, knowledge of stars and seasons. It's the ghost of a civilization hiding just behind the curtain of time. The wildest part? We're still discovering new Denisovan clues, sometimes in ancient bones, other times in modern DNA. Each discovery pulls back the veil just a little more. So, maybe they didn't build great stone monuments. Maybe their cities were made of wood and mud swallowed up by jungle and time. But their real legacy? It's inside us, carried in our veins, hidden in our lungs, echoing in our survival. The Denisovans may have disappeared from the earth, but not from the story. Alright, here's the wild part. You know how we always imagine ancient humans locked in survival mode? competing, fighting, maybe even wiping each other out? Well, turns out we were also hooking up. And those hookups, they changed everything. Somewhere deep in the misty forests of Eurasia, a Neanderthal and a Homo sapien crossed paths. Not with clubs, but with curiosity, with emotion, maybe even love. It wasn't a one-off. Genetic evidence says it happened a lot. Modern humans didn't just replace other species. We interbred with them. Neanderthals, Denisovans, possibly even others we haven't fully identified yet. You're not reading sci-fi. This is cold, hard genetics. Today, almost everyone outside Africa carries Neanderthal DNA somewhere between 1–2%. If you've ever had a weird immune response, unique skin sensitivity, or even insomnia, yeah, you might be feeling the echo of ancient romance. But it gets deeper. People from Papua New Guinea, parts of Southeast Asia, and Oceania, they can carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That's not a blip. That's a legacy. And get this, some individuals from Asia have both Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA from different encounters, meaning there were humans walking around who were genetic mosaics, the ultimate hybrids. Meet Deni, the first known hybrid. Scientists found her in a Siberian cave. Her name? Deni. She was just a teenager when she died, over 90 years ago. But her bones told a jaw-dropping story. Her mom was Neanderthal. Her dad? Denisovan, a literal 50-50 hybrid. This wasn't just theory anymore. It was real. They lived together, slept together, had children. And maybe those children had children. You and I might be carrying that legacy today. What were these hybrids like? Now here's the kicker: these weren't just regular humans. Hybrid offspring may have had supercharged traits-boosted immunity, better adaptation to certain climates, and maybe even cognitive advantages. But it wasn't all roses. Sometimes their DNA didn't mesh well. Some hybrid pregnancies may have failed. Some genes caused issues and got naturally filtered out over time. But others, they stuck. For a reason. The episone genici for surviving at high altitudes came straight from Denisovans. That's why modern Tibetans can breathe easy where others struggle. A 50-year-old hookup is the reason they can climb Everest. We like to draw hard lines between species. Neanderthals versus humans. Denisovans versus Homo sapiens. But those lines blur, and in some cases, they vanish completely. Because the truth is, evolution isn't neat. It's messy, emotional, raw. It's attraction in the wild. It's desperation. It's curiosity. It's the story of people meeting under strange sky sand, deciding to stay. Maybe they didn't know they were different species. Maybe they didn't care. Today, we carry the evidence in our blood. We're walking mashups of ancient lovers, of competing tribes that chose connection over conquest, at least sometimes. It wasn't just survival of the fittest. Sometimes it was survival of the hybrid. And without them, maybe we wouldn't be here. You've heard of Neanderthals. You've heard of Denisovans. But what if there were others? Species we never met, never named, never dug up, and yet they're part of us. Not in fossils. In our DNA. Here's the mind-bender. When scientists scanned modern human genome, especially from people in West Africa, they found strange markers. Sequences that didn't match Homo sapiens, didn't match Neanderthals, didn't match Denisovans. So where did they come from? Answer: a mysterious, unknown species. One that left behind no bones, no artifacts, just genetic fingerprints. Some researchers call them ghost populations, not because they were mythical, but because they vanished without a trace. Except one: us. These ghost species weren't fringe outliers. They contributed up to 19% of certain West African populations' DNA. That's not a blip. That's a whole storyline missing from the fossil record. And they're not alone. Studies have found similar ghost signatures in people from Melanesia, South Asia, and other isolated groups. Different, unknown species. Different timelines. But the same pattern. Humans met others. They mixed. And then those others disappeared. So, who were they? That's the haunting part. We don't know. They could have been earlier offshoots of Homo erectus, or maybe isolated branches of Homo heidelbergensis, or something we've never even imagined. The Earth was huge, forest dense, caves deep. Not every species left bones behind. But our genes, they remember. This means we didn't evolve in a straight line. We evolved through a chaotic dance with partners we may never identify. Some scientists were skeptical at first. Couldn't this just be a weird mutation? A lab error? Nope. These genetic fragments are consistent. They show signatures of interbreeding, just like Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA. They appear in specific places on the genome, where introgression, gene flow from one species to another, is common. Translation: these weren't accidents. These were ancient encounters. This changes the way we see human evolution. It's not a ladder. It's not a tree. It's a tangled web. A genetic mystery thriller with missing chapters and unnamed characters. And you're carrying pieces of that story. Genes that scientists can't fully explain. Inherited from someone long gone. Someone no one remembers. But someone who mattered. We may never find their fossils. We may never draw their faces. But their presence is real. And in a strange way, they're not gone. They're still alive inside us. Thousands of years ago, the Earth was crowded with intelligent beings. Not just Homo sapiens, but Neanderthals, Denisovans, and others now lost to time. Yet today, we're the only ones left. Why? It wasn't strength. It wasn't brains alone. It was something deeper and far more human. Let's unravel what truly made us the last species standing. We didn't just adapt. We outmaneuvered. Survival wasn't about being the strongest. It was about being the smartest at survival. Other species were locked into specific environments. Neanderthals, for example, were built for cold Europe. But Homo sapiens? We were mobile, curious, restless. We learned to live everywhere. Jungles, deserts, savannas, frozen tundras. We hacked every ecosystem we touched. We didn't wait for the world to change. For us, we changed ourselves to fit the world. Our secret weapon: massive social networks. We weren't just individuals. We were tribes, communities, clans, cultures. While Neanderthals lived in tight-knit, small groups, we connected across miles. We built alliances, traded tools, shared knowledge. More connection meant more innovation. More hands meant more protection. And when disaster struck, we had fallback groups, others who would help us bounce back. That's not evolution. That's social engineering. We could think beyond the now. Other humans used tools, but Homo sapiens used symbols, stories, art. We imagined gods. We painted stars. We told tales of death and afterlife. Why does that matter? Because imagination builds cooperation. It lets strangers work together toward shared beliefs. It lets future generations build on the dreams of the past. When you can see beyond the moment, you start shaping the future. We played the long game. It wasn't about one epic battle. It was about resilience, surviving droughts, disease, ice ages, rivalry. Others faded fast, but we bent without breaking. We spread faster, rebounded quicker, held on longer. Some species fell to natural disasters, others from shrinking gene pools. We had both but still made it. Why? Because we never stopped adapting. Maybe luck played a role, but we used it well. Let's be real, some of it was luck. A volcano didn't erupt near us. A virus wiped out others, not us. A food chain collapsed and we found a way around it. But survival isn't just about luck. It's what you do with the lucky break that counts. And we turned every edge into an empire. We became the apex predator of ideas. Homo sapiens didn't just survive in the wild. We rewrote the wild. From mastering fire to farming the earth. From shaping weapons to shaping minds. From cave art to code. While other species tried to outlive the environment, we redefined it. We didn't win because we were perfect. We won because we were relentless, adaptive, imaginative, connected. We weren't the strongest. We weren't the fastest. But we were the ones who kept evolving mentally, socially, spiritually. That's why, when the dust settled, we were still here. And the others? They became whispers in our genes, bones in the ground, and legends in the stories we tell. We didn't just survive. We conquered. Once Homo sapiens stood alone, we didn't stop. We lit the torch of civilization and ran with it. But how did we go from hunters in the wild to kings, architects, and inventors shaping entire continents? Let's rewind the tape and watch humanity build a world. It all started with fire and farming. The game changer? Agriculture. 0 years ago, we stopped chasing food and started growing it. This one shift changed everything. No more constant moving. Settlements began. Villages turned to towns. Towns turned into cities. Now, we had time to think, create, build, and dream bigger. Fire kept us warm. Farming kept us fed. And community? That gave us purpose. With food stored and homes secured, we unlocked a new human instinct. Organization. We needed leaders. Rules, roles, routines. Language exploded. So did religion, trade, and currency. We weren't just surviving anymore, we were structuring life. We wrote laws on stone, built monuments to the gods, traded goods across rivers and deserts. Civilization was a team sport, and we were just getting warmed up. What separated us from the animals wasn't just toolset, was meaning. We didn't just build walls, we carved stories into them. We didn't just hunt, we gave thanks to the sky. From Mesopotamia to the Nile, from the Indus to the Yangtze, humans began shaping reality around belief systems, values, and shared identity. And as our stories got bigger, so did our ambition. We weren't content with what we had. We were always asking, what's next? The wheel, the sail, the plow, the printing press, the compass. Each leap of innovation fueled the next chapter of civilization. Soon, we weren't just living in tribes. We were building empires, mapping the stars, crossing oceans. Curiosity became currency. Here's the dark truth. As we expanded, we didn't always do it peacefully. We built walls but also weapons. We organized but also oppressed. We created while also conquering. Civilization brought power, yes, but also war, inequality, and destruction. Still, even in our flaws, we kept moving forward, learning, falling, getting back up. Because at our core we're not just builders, we're dreamers. Once we were one species among many. Now we're a species shaping the planet. Our rise wasn't a straight line. It was chaotic, messy, brilliant, brutal, beautiful. But it's this rise from dirt huts to digital cities that defines what makes us human. And the question now isn't how we rose. It's, where do we go from here? 7 walked beside us. Now only one remains. Us. Why? What made Homo sapiens the chosen ones while the others faded out? It wasn't strength. Neanderthals had that. It wasn't size. Some cousins were bigger. It wasn't even brain sway, all had them. So what tilted the scale in our favor? Let's unpack the edge that made us undeniably human and unstoppable. Other species were smart, but we weren't just smart, we were storytellers. We imagined gods, dreamed up rules, believed in invisible things like currency, nations, and karma. That kind of thinking? It builds trust, big groups, shared missions. While others acted on instinct, we acted on vision. It wasn't about the know it was about what could be. Neanderthals? Small groups. Us? Megatribes. We formed alliances with strangers, traded with distant villages, passed knowledge across continents. We weren't just surviving as individuals, we were networking as a species. That meant more innovation, more defense, more power. One brain could spark fire. 1,000 could spark a revolution. We couldn't outrun predators or outmuscle them. So we built spears, traps, weapons of precision. We didn't wrestle nature, we outthought it. Even our bodies evolved differently. We ran longer, not faster. We sweated more, not roared louder. Our superpower? Using our weaknesses as fuel to build smarter solutions. Where Neanderthals might have had routines, we had rituals. Where others had skills, we had symbols. We painted. We buried our dead. We passed down ideas, not just genes. And with every generation, our identity evolved. We weren't just living, we were shaping a legacy. Climate changed. We moved. Land dried up. We found rivers, invented farming. Resources ran out. We traded, explored, discovered more. We didn't dig into comfort, we chased the edge. And that hunger to adapt made extinction not an option. We weren't the fastest, or the strongest, or the fiercest. But we were the most resilient, curious, and cooperative. And that cocktail? That's what made us the last species left in the arena. The others didn't just vanish, they were outplayed, outpaced, outlasted. They were here for hundreds of thousands of years, survived brutal winters, fought predators we couldn't imagine. They were tough, smart, and wildly adapted to Europe's cold. So why did the Neanderthals, the legends, vanish? Let's break it down. Neanderthals were cold-weather warriors, shorter limbs, stocky builds, bigger noses for warming air, perfect for Ice Age Europe. But when the climate started shifting, warming, cooling unpredictably, they couldn't flex fast enough. They were specialists. We were generalists. And in a world of change, specialists are the first to go. Neanderthals lived in tiny, tight-knit bands. Maybe 10-30 people per group. That's cozy. Until disaster hits. A bad winter? A disease? Suddenly, half your tribe is gone, and you're too small to recover. Meanwhile, we were rolling with hundreds. We shared info, moved in networks. We could take a hit and bounce back. They couldn't. Let's be real. Neanderthals weren't dumb. They made tools, used fire, maybe even had language, but their tools stayed the same for tens of thousands of years. Ours? We were remixing and reinventing constantly. New spear tips, better shelters, art, music, rituals. They evolved biologically. We evolved culturally faster, smarter, and with fewer limits. That made us harder to predict and way harder to compete with. Neanderthals stuck to Europe and parts of Western Asia. They didn't roam like us, didn't explore far. That isolation, it was a trap. No diversity, no fresh ideas, no outside help. When the pressure built weather, food shortages, us moving in, they were cornered. And when you're cornered with no new allies, game over. Let's address the elephant in the cave. Did Homo sapiens destroy the Neanderthals? The answer? Maybe, but not how you think. It probably wasn't war like some primal Game of Thrones. More like competition. We hunted the same prey, gathered the same roots, lived in the same regions. And with bigger groups, better communication, and faster adaptation, we outcompeted them into extinction. But here's the twism, didn't die off completely. They mixed with us. If you've got European or Asian ancestry, you're carrying Neanderthal DNA right now. They're gone, but not entirely. It wasn't one big event. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Climate change chipped away. Isolation made them fragile. Our arrival tipped the balance. And over thousands of years, they simply faded. No epic battle, no doomsday event. Just time, pressure, and evolution. Neanderthals weren't just a footnote. They taught us, challenged us, and, in many ways, helped shape us. We learned by watching them. And when they were gone, the world felt emptier but, somehow, more ours. Their story is a warning. Adapt, evolve, or disappear. And it reminds us being human isn't about survival, it's about transformation. Ready for the next one? Because Neanderthals weren't the only close call. They lit the first fires, walked upright before any of us, crossed continents with nothing but stone tools and sheer grit. Homo erectus was a beast, not in size, but in endurance. They lasted for nearly 2 million years. That's insane. So why are they gone? Why did the longest-lasting human species disappear just before the world was about to be ours? Let's uncover the fall of the OG survivors. Homo erectus was the first great explorer. Africa, they crushed it. Asia, settled there too. Even parts of Europe, yep, they reached it all. But while they were great at getting around, they were slow at keeping up. Their tools? Basic stone axes. Same design for hundreds of thousands of years. No big leaps. No wild inventions. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens and even Neanderthals were innovating. Fast. And in a game of survival, evolution doesn't wait. Erectus thrived in a stable world. But Earth doesn't play fair. Sudden climate swings hit their strongholds. Forests turned into deserts. Rivers dried up. Animals migrated. And Erectus? They didn't have the tech to adapt. No complex shelters, no hunting strategies, no cultural backup. They were built for endurance, not flexibility. But when the world keeps shifting, endurance alone isn't enough. For a long time, Homo erectus had the game to themselves. But then we showed up. Homo sapiens, Homo heidelbergensis, even Denisovans. And suddenly, things got crowded. We hunted better, organized, smarter, shared knowledge across groups. Erectus couldn't compete. Not with our fire-starting, trap-setting, language-using ancestors. Imagine being in a race where everyone suddenly gets a jetpack and you're still jogging. That's how Erectus fell behind. Here's a hard truth. Erectus didn't disappear everywhere at once. In fact, the last known Homo erectus lived in Indonesia, on the island of Java, just 100 years ago. That's wild. We were already painting caves and building societies by then. But in isolated pockets, they held on. Quietly. Fading. Why? Because they didn't change. They didn't form large communities. Didn't build complex cultures. Didn't pass down innovations at scale. They just survived. And that was their downfall. In a fast-evolving world, just surviving is slow death. Did we have a hand in their fall? Here's where it gets murky. There's no direct evidence of Homo sapiens and Homo erectus clashing swords or stones. But we likely outcompeted them wherever our paths crossed. More efficient hunters, better social networks, faster breeding cycles. And once we started spreading, resources got tight, pressure built, and Homo erectus, the once great trailblazer, slowly got pushed to the margins. Until the last flicker went out. They may be gone, but Homo erectus left a massive legacy. First to walk like us. First to harness fire. First to step out of Africa and dream bigger. Without them, there is no us. They didn't fail. They just set the stage for something greater. For us, the lesson? Being first doesn't guarantee you'll finish. It's the ones who adapt, share, and evolve that survive the final round. You've probably never heard them speak. No epic cave paintings, no ancient tools named after them, no full skeleton ever found. And yet, they're inside all of us. The Denisovans are humanity's mystery species. A cousin so elusive, it took scientists a single pinky bone to even realize they existed. So, how did these powerful humans, adapted to the harshest altitudes on Earth, go extinct? Let's unravel the quiet fall of the ghost tribe of humanity. First off, these weren't weaklings. Denisovans thrived in the freezing mountains of Siberia and Tibet. They built lives in altitudes that would make most modern humans pass out. Their DNA literally helped Tibetans breathe better. That's how deeply they adapted. So it's not like they got wiped out because they were fragile. If anything, they were built like tanks. But here's the twist. For all their power, the Denisovans never built a wide empire. They stuck to their strongholds, caves, mountains, cold zones. And unlike Neanderthals or Homo sapiens, they didn't spread far or fast. Their world was quiet, isolated, and limited, which made them vulnerable. When disease, food shortages, or rival species entered the scene, they didn't have the network or numbers to hold out. Here's the wild part. Denisovans didn't just vanish. They merged. Modern humans mated with Denisovans in Asia and Oceania. Today, up to 6% of Melanesian DNA comes from them. Even some East Asians carry fragments. So technically, they're not fully extinct. They live on inside us. But their culture, their language, their way of life, gone. That's the difference. We didn't kill them off with violence. We just absorbed them. Let's not forget, the Earth was a rough place 50 years ago. The Ice Age was raging. Food was scarce. Ecosystems kept shifting. Species that couldn't organize, innovate, or migrate fast enough. They got left behind. The Denisovans may have had strong lungs and sturdy bodies, but they lacked long-distance strategy. And in a world where only the smartest and most social survived, they were left alone in the cold. So why did they really disappear? It wasn't a dramatic war. It was a slow fade. Isolated groups, minimal innovation, interbreeding with other humans. And eventually, no distinct Denisovan culture left to pass on. They didn't fall. They dissolved. Today, their traces are in our blood. They gave us stronger immune systems, high-altitude genes, clues about our own evolution. They were never meant to last forever, but their fragments made us stronger. In losing them, we became more complete. Burials, dark, ritualistic chambers, and a brain barely the size of a chimp's. Everything about Homo naledi screams contradiction. Discovered deep within the Rising Star Cave system in South Africa, this species didn't just puzzle scientists, it shattered assumptions about intelligence, consciousness, and what it means to be human. Because if what we've found is true, Homo naledi might have understood death, even with a brain that fits in your palm. So, why didn't they make it? Let's step into the darkness and the mystery. Found in 2013, Homo naledi was a shock from the start. Small stature, about 5 feet tall. Tiny brain, around 465, 610 C, less than half of ours. Mix of traits, primitive skull, curved fingers, but human-like feet and legs. It was like someone took traits from 2 million years ago and dropped them into a body that lived as recently as 236,000 years ago. Yep, while Neanderthals and even early Homo sapiens were roaming Earth, this primitive species was still around. But what blew everything open? Where they were found. They buried their dead. Their remains weren't scattered. They were deliberately placed deep inside narrow cave tunnels, far beyond natural access. No signs of predators dragging them in. No collapse. Just bodies. It looked intentional, almost like burial. But wait, they didn't have fire. They didn't have tools to light their way. How did they even get down there? And why? We still don't have a clear answer. But if it was burial, that changes everything. Because it would mean that consciousness and ritual don't need a massive brain. They need something else. Something we don't fully understand. Let's be clear. Homo naledi was resilient. They survived in tough terrain, outlasted early hominins, and lived alongside far more advanced species. But they lacked a few things that turned out to be non-negotiable for survival. No fire, that means no warmth, no cooking, no protection, no long-distance tools, no spears, no fishing hooks, no bow and arrow, no migration evidence. They likely stayed within a small area, isolated. And isolation is dangerous in evolution. Because when droughts hit, or predators shifted, or diseases spread small, stagnant groups were the first to vanish. They couldn't adapt fast enough. Here's the kicker, we still don't know how smart they were. Maybe they had symbolic thought. Maybe they didn't. But finding their bones arranged in a hidden, pitch-black, tomb-like cave? That feels like something more than instinct. It feels like intention. It feels like a message. And if Homo naledi had a message, it's this. Never underestimate a species by its size. They didn't leave behind tools or paintings. No cave cities. No mythologies. But what they might have left is something far more haunting. A glimpse at a kind of mind we never thought possible. A mind that felt fear, grief, and maybe even love. All inside a brain the size of an orange. In the end, Homo naledi didn't go out with a bang. They slipped into the shadows like they lived there all along. But their story echoes in our bones, challenging the myth that intelligence equals size, or that survival means dominance. They were quiet. They were strange. And maybe, just maybe, they were more like us than we want to admit. Imagine a human, just 3 feet tall, with a brain smaller than a grapefruit. Now imagine that same human hunting giant rats, crafting tools, and surviving on a remote island surrounded by deadly predators. Sounds like fantasy, right? Welcome to the world of Homo floresiensis, named the Hobbits. Not because of fiction, but because they were real, fierce, and full of surprises. Discovered on the Indonesian island of Flores in 2003, this species turned the evolutionary story on its head. And here's the craziest part. Some people believe they never left. Homo floresiensis lived about 100, 0 to 50, 0 years ago. But that's a ballpark. Some researchers say they might have survived even longer. What we know for sure, they lived in Liang Bua Cave, where their remains were found along with stone tools, fire evidence, and butchered animal bones. This wasn't just some primitive offshoot. These were adaptable survivors who thrived in isolation. Why so small? Flores is an island, and islands do weird things to evolution. It's called island dwarfism when species shrink over time due to limited resources and no predators. Think tiny elephants, which lived on Flores too, or miniature deer. In that same ecosystem, Homo floresiensis shrank, possibly evolving from earlier hominins like Homo erectus. But even with that tiny brain about 400 cc, they were anything but dumb. Despite their size, these hobbits used fire to cook and protect themselves, crafted sharp-edged stone tools, hunted and processed prey far larger than themselves, built camps and lived in structured groups. They didn't just survive. They thrived in one of the harshest environments imaginable. And they did it while saber-toothed predators and massive lizards roamed around. Yep, Komodo dragons were, and still are, their neighbors. Let that sink in. Why did they vanish? Their extinction is still a mystery. But a few likely suspects include arrival of Homo sapiens. We showed up around 0 years ago, and wherever we went, species disappeared. Environmental shifts, volcanic eruptions, sea level changes, and climate swings may have wrecked their fragile habitat. Limited gene pool, being isolated for so long, may have hurt their ability to adapt quickly. One wrong turn, one drought too many, and the hobbits disappeared. Or did they? Still alive? Local legends on Flores tell of Ebu Gogoa, small, hairy, human-like creature that walked upright, stole food, and mimicked speech. Some locals swear they were real. Some say they vanished just 100 years ago. Others say they're still hiding in the dense jungle. And with how little we've explored those areas, who knows? Flores has a way of guarding its secrets. Homo floresiensis destroyed the idea that a big brain means advanced. They proved intelligence can come in small packages shaped by survival, not status. They weren't mistakes. They weren't weak. They were island warriors, resilient, clever, and unique. Their story isn't just about what we lost. It's about what we still don't understand. Because sometimes, the smallest beings leave the biggest questions. Let's talk about Ghostnot, the kind haunting old houses. The kind haunting your DNA. Because right now, inside you, there's a chance you're carrying genetic echoes of a species we've never seen face to face. Meet the Denisovans, the hominin mystery that never left. Siberia. Scientists digging in Denisova Cave uncovered a pinky finger bone and a molar. At first glance, nothing special. But when they extracted the DNA, boom. It wasn't human. It wasn't Neanderthal. It was something else, a completely different species we had never identified before. Just like that, a whole new chapter of human evolution opened. And we still know almost nothing about them. Here's the twist. Even though we've never seen a complete Denisovan skeleton, their DNA lives on in millions of people. If you have ancestry from Asia, Oceania, or the Pacific Islands, you might carry up to 5% Denisovan DNA. That's not small talk. That's real, inherited biological code from a species that went extinct tens of thousands of years ago. They live in us literally. Turns out, Denisovan DNA wasn't just some leftover junk. It gave us gifts. High-altitude survival. Tibetan populations can breathe easy at 14,000 feet thanks to a Denisovan gene. Stronger immune systems. Some immune system upgrades in Southeast Asian populations came straight from Denisovan code. Fat metabolism and skin traits. These are still being studied, but signs point to adaptation boosts passed down over millennia. These weren't just random ancient cousins. They help shape who we are today. So, who were they? That's the thing, we're still piecing it together. We believe Denisovans split from Neanderthals around 400 years ago. They spread across Asia, likely interbreeding with both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. But beyond their DNA, they left almost no physical trace. We don't know what their faces looked like. We don't know what tools they used. We don't even know how they really died out. They're a presence felt, but never seen, like evolution's shadow. Because the Denisovans prove that our story is never simple. We didn't just evolve in a straight line from cavemen to coders. We mixed, we collided, we merged. Our species is a mosaic of everyone who came before. The Denisovans might be gone, but they live on in our lungs, our blood, our bones. So next time you take a deep breath in the mountains or shake off a virus with ease, remember, that edge might just be a gift from a species we never met. We've been quick to point fingers. They didn't survive because of us. Competition killed them. Humans were just smarter. Sure, those theories hold weight, but let's throw in a curveball. What if it wasn't war, wits, or weapons? What if the Earth itself played executioner? Rewind 70 years. The planet was a mess. Massive climate swings were the norm. Glaciers advanced and retreated like they couldn't make up their mind. Rainfall patterns flipped. Forests became deserts. Food chains collapsed. The Ice Age wasn't just cold, it was chaotic. And that chaos didn't just test survival skills. It reshaped the board entirely. Here's the thing about humans, we're insanely adaptable. We didn't just survive climate shocks. We used them. When the Sahara turned green, we moved in. When ice sheets withdrew, we followed the fresh game. When coastlines shifted, we fished deeper waters. Homo sapiens were flexible, mobile, opportunistic. But for our cousins like the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo erectus, that adaptability just wasn't there at the same scale. They relied on fixed food zones, specific habitats, or predictable hunting routes. So when the weather shifted fast, they couldn't shift with it. Archaeologists have mapped where and when these other species lived. What's eerie? Their disappearances coincide with brutal climate spikes. Around 74 years ago, the Toba supervolcano erupted, possibly causing a decade-long volcanic winter. Around 42 years ago, Earth's magnetic field flipped in what's known as the La Champs excursion, exposing the surface to higher radiation and climate instability. During the last glacial maximum, around 26 years ago, sea levels dropped dramatically, reshaping continents. Each of these events brought rapid ecological changes. And after each one, fewer species remained standing. Let's be real. Other factors were definitely in play. Competition from Homo sapiens, disease exchange, interbreeding dilution, resource conflict. But climate? That was the invisible hand, tilting the scales again and again. It weakened populations, pushed them into smaller zones, made survival exponentially harder. When food is scarce and winters last years, you're not thinking about innovation or expansion. You're thinking about not dying tomorrow. Sound familiar? Because here's the kicker. We're still facing climate chaos. But now, it's not just ice or fire from the sky. It's us driving temperature, spikes, sea rise, extinction waves. The same pressures that likely wiped out ancient species, we're recreating them. Only this time, we're the dominant species on the chopping block. Understanding how climate shaped our past isn't just a history lesson, it's a warning label. The downfall of the other human species might not have been a war. It might have been a slow suffocation by cold, drought, starvation, and storms. They didn't lose a fight. They lost their place in a world that was changing too fast. And if we're not careful, we could be next. Big threats don't always roar. Sometimes, extinction creeps in silently through empty cradles and missing campfires. Let's talk about a killer no one sees coming: population collapse. Because it wasn't always spears, disease, or hunger that wiped out the other human species. Sometimes, there were just too few of them left to survive. Imagine a tribe of 50 Neanderthals. They're isolated. Winter hits hard. The elders die. The hunters break legs. No babies are born for 2 seasons straight. Suddenly, you've got 30 people left. And from there, the math starts working against them. Small populations spiral fast. It's called a genetic bottleneck. When a group gets so small, inbreeding weakens the entire gene pool. Disease resistance drops. Birth defects rise. Mental sharpness dulls. They're alive, but they're not built to last. Let's get blunt. Ancient DNA doesn't lie. Studies show Neanderthals were heavily inbred near the end. Many shared more genetic material than first cousins. That's a red flag for isolation and desperation. You can't expand a species on broken genes. And once the spiral starts, it's nearly impossible to reverse. Now picture that across different regions: scattered Denisovan groups in Asia, Homo erectus in pockets, even the mysterious Homo floresiensis on an island. Each one shrinking, isolated, and unable to mix with others. They didn't die in battle. They faded quietly. Here's where we were different. Homo sapiens had critical mass. We moved in larger groups, traveled farther, mated wider, shared knowledge across camps. When a flood hit one tribe, another could absorb survivors. We weren't just surviving, we were networked. And that made us anti-fragile. Other species, they didn't have that backup system. So when disaster hit, there was no one left to catch the fall. Here's the twist. This low population threat, it's not ancient history. It's what scientists fear today with endangered animals and, in extreme cases, even humans. Certain isolated communities face the same genetic risks. Diseases that should have been shrugged off suddenly become fatal. And as global fertility rates plummet and modern life isolates us more, the lessons from Neanderthals feel uncomfortably close. It wasn't always a dramatic end. No war cry, no final stand. For some human species, the end came with empty tents, unanswered calls, and slow, quiet vanishing. The lesson? You can't survive alone. And sometimes, the deadliest enemy isn't out there, it's the silence within your own kind. They had brains. They made tools. They hunted in groups. Heck, some even buried their dead in painted caves. So here's the question that punches you in the gut. If they were smart, why didn't they make it? This section hits a raw nerve. Because intelligence should have been the great equalizer, right? Turns out, brains alone weren't enough. And what Homo sapiens did differently wasn't just about what we thought, but how we thought together. Neanderthals had big brains, sometimes even bigger than ours. Denisovans? Similar story. Homo heidelbergensis, sharp problem solvers. Even Homo naledi showed signs of symbolic behavior. But intelligence isn't just about brain size or complexity. It's about adaptability, social flow, and idea scaling. These species had the spark. They just couldn't turn it into fire. Here's what sapiens mastered that others didn't. Shared imagination. We didn't just think, we thought as one. We created myths, stories, symbols, and then used those to organize ourselves. This is what researchers call collective cognition, where the tribe becomes smarter than the individual. You can pass down ideas, build on them, improve them. That's how early humans created new hunting strategies, religion, and culture. It's how we went from stone axes to moon landings. Other species, they had intelligence, but they didn't scale it. Yes, Neanderthals used tools, but their toolkit didn't change for tens of thousands of years. They made the same spears, same scrapers, same routines generation after generation. Sapiens, meanwhile, were remixing. Bone tools, hooks, atlatls, sewing needles, jewelry, musical instruments. That kind of innovation doesn't just require intelligence. It requires a culture of change. And once we crossed that line, there was no looking back. Another overlooked edge? Social flexibility. Homo sapiens weren't just logical, we were emotional engineers. We read facial cues better, built alliances with strangers, managed complex social webs. That meant we could form larger groups, trust beyond bloodlines, and move as networks rather than clusters. Other species didn't connect on that level. Without empathy, stories, and shared purpose, they couldn't build anything bigger than survival. Here's the brutal truth. You can be smart and still die out. If you're not adaptable, not social, not innovative, then intelligence becomes a dead end. Think of it like this. A high-performance car is useless without fuel, a map, and other cars to race with. The Neanderthals had the engine. We had the highway system. That's the difference. Intelligence didn't fail them. It just wasn't complete. The real edge wasn't raw intellect, it was the ability to share, scale, and sync minds across miles. We weren't the smartest. We were the most connected. That's what made us unstoppable. They cared. They stayed. They grieved. We've painted them as primitive, but in truth, many of these extinct human cousins had hearts that beat like ours. They loved each other. They formed families. They buried their dead. They may have even mourned. But here's the tragedy. Even deep bonds couldn't save them. For years, we assumed survival was about strength, smarts, and speed. But now we know emotion played a powerful role too. Neanderthals likely cared for injured group members. Fossils show individuals who lived for years with disabilities, meaning someone helped them eat, move, survive. Homo naledi buried their dead in deliberate places. Homo heidelbergensis may have used ritual. These weren't cold, disconnected creatures. They had relationships. They had us in them. So what went wrong? Here's where love may have backfired. They cared too narrowly. Neanderthals, for example, lived in small, tightly bonded groups. Loyalty ran deep, but only within those walls. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens were learning how to trust strangers, to expand the circle, to create communities bonded by ideas, not just blood. We built networks, trade routes, tribes that could merge and grow. They built strong families. We built civilizations. Imagine this. A Neanderthal group loses 2 hunters. That's 40% of their adult males gone. They're loyal, so they don't bring outsiders in. They shrink and eventually vanish. Now flip it. A sapiens band merges with a nearby tribe. They share food, stories, DNA. When one family weakens, another steps up. The group adapts, survives. Love was a strength, but in isolation, it became a weakness. Because evolution doesn't reward feelings. It rewards function. There's evidence Neanderthals grieved their dead. Some buried them with care, maybe even flowers. But grief without growth is a cul-de-sac. Sapiens turned loss into meaning, into myths, rituals, legends that bound us together. When we mourned, we remembered. And when we remembered, we taught. And when we taught, we evolved. The others, they felt the pain, but they didn't build from it. Here's the truth, raw and clear. They had heart. We had horizon. They looked inward, protecting their own. We looked outward, creating the idea of our own. That shift from loyalty to a few, to connection with the many is why we're here and they're not. This wasn't just survival of the fittest. It was survival of the most open-hearted in a whole new way. Not just those who loved, but those who loved big, wide, forward. That's the twist. And that's why we stayed and they faded. Picture this. A single Neanderthal huddled near a dying fire. Snow falling outside. The wind howling through empty caves. He's not just cold. He's the last. The final heartbeat of an entire species. That's not sci-fi. That's history's, just not the kind we usually talk about. It's not sudden, not loud, not cinematic. It's a whisper. One by one, individuals disappear. Families shrink. Voices fade. Until there's no one left to remember. The songs, the hunts, the names. That's extinction. Imagine knowing your kind is gone. No familiar faces. No one who speaks your language. No one who understands you. The last of any species carries a weight of memories, instincts, rituals. But there's no one to pass them to. No next generation. No rebirth. Just echoes in an empty world. Did they realize they were the last? Probably not. Species don't get a memo that says, "You're going extinct." But they felt it. Less food, colder seasons, strangers with strange weapons, illness they couldn't name. Their world got smaller, while ours expanded. They may have clung to old ways, but the future didn't wait. There's a haunting truth here. When a species dies, a sound disappears forever. A call, a laughter, a rhythm of footsteps in the forest. When the last Homo floresiensis fell asleep for the last time, that entire frequency went silent. We didn't just lose a body. We lost a song. Each extinct cousin of ours was a story tens of thousands of years long, told through migration, fire, art, love, struggle. But a story untold is a story erased. We're the only ones left who can speak for them. Because extinction doesn't just wipe out DNA. It erases meaning, unless we carry it. You're not just watching a documentary. You're witnessing memory. You're reviving ghosts. We share blood with the lost ones. But more than that, we share responsibility. Because one day, someone might look back at us and wonder what our last day felt like. Unless we learn. Unless we change. Unless we remember. What if one spark had caught just a little sooner? What if one storm had never hit? What if one Neanderthal made the right alliance? Or one Homo erectus stumbled into the perfect valley? The tiniest change could have rewritten history. Because evolution isn't just biology. It's luck, timing, and momentum. Let's play with that idea. In our world, Homo sapiens made it to the top. But we weren't always the front runners. There were moments close, ones where another species could have taken the lead. Imagine if Neanderthals hadn't been isolated in Europe when the climate turned harsh, or if they had stronger interbreeding ties with early humans. That's not a stretch. Genetic evidence shows we already mixed with them. One more generation of blending? Boom, a new hybrid species. Smarter, stronger, cold-resistant. Maybe they inherit the Earth. What if the Denisovans expanded? The Denisovans had something we didn't: high-altitude survival skills. They thrived in mountain ranges where we would have gasped for air. What if they had spread across Asia before us? They might have owned the Silk Road before it ever existed. Entire empires could have risen in the Himalayas, guided by their lungs and instincts. We'd be the footnotes. Then there's Homo erectus, the long-distance marathoner of our lineage. They lasted longer than you think, over 1.5 million years. They knew fire, tools, migration. So what happened? Their technology plateaued. They didn't adapt fast enough. But what if one clan had invented a new hunting strategy? Or stumbled into a breakthrough fishing nets, farming routes, taming animals? That's all it would have taken. And suddenly, Homo sapiens would have met a rival they couldn't outpace. We weren't better, we were luckier. Here's the uncomfortable truth. We didn't outlive them because we were superior in every way. We were more adaptable, yes, but also, we caught the right breaks. Milder climates, strategic migrations, and sometimes we just got there first. Flip one of those dominoes, history collapses and builds itself into something else. Imagine the world today. Now picture this: Neanderthal astronauts, Denisovan skyscrapers, a global alliance between Homo sapiens and Homo floresiensis, languages formed with different tongues, cities designed by different brains, art made by hands with thicker fingers, broader skulls, deeper souls. That's not fantasy. It's the world that almost was. Thinking about what could have happened teaches us something vital. We're not inevitable. We're not the final version. We're just the survivors of a billion random events. So maybe, just maybe, we should carry that legacy with a bit more humility. Because one more drought, one more bad migration, one more failure to adapt, and we'd be the cave paintings. Imagine walking through Times Square and spotting a Neanderthal barista behind the counter, or catching a flight and sitting next to a Denisovan engineer, nose deep in blueprints. Sounds wild? Maybe, but not impossible. Because here's the thing, they almost made it. And in an alternate timeline, they're still here, thriving alongside us. Let's open that door. If Neanderthals, Denisovans, Floresiensis, and others never went extinct, Earth would look radically different. We wouldn't be humanity. We'd be a coalition of species, one intelligent. Each one evolved in its own brilliant way. Our cities wouldn't be built for one kind of body. You'd see wide streets for stockier Neanderthal frames, ladders and vertical zones for the tree-scaling Homo floresiensis, workshops in high altitudes run by Denisovans who breathe thin air like it's nothing. We're talking a true multi-species civilization with politics, art, and conflict, shaped by evolutionary diversity. Let's get real. Coexistence isn't always pretty. There'd be prejudice, power struggles, misunderstandings. But there'd also be collaboration, unlike anything we've seen. Neanderthal music deep, percussive, primal. Denisovan architecture rooted in landscape, designed for harmony with the mountains. Floresiensis storytelling, oral traditions, passed down in rapid, high-pitched language. We wouldn't just have diversity. We'd have divergent minds literally. And that would explode our definition of culture, science, even what it means to be civilized. Let's go deeper. We already know Homo sapiens and Neanderthals interbred. What if that never stopped? By now, we might have entire mixed species lineages, some with Neanderthal strength, sapiens, creativity, and Denisovan lungs. Imagine what that kind of fusion could do to sports, innovation, or leadership. A literal blend of traits sharpened by millions of years in different environments. It wouldn't be about better or worse. It would be about hybrid potential. But don't forget, with new species come new rights, new tensions. We'd have to redefine personhood. Can a Homo floresiensis vote? Is denying a Neanderthal a job speciesism? Legal systems would evolve. Interspecies marriages, multi-species schools, entire new philosophies on life, death, freedom. And yep, there'd be interspecies drama TikToks blowing up over sapiens versus Denisovan dating trends. Sounds chaotic? Maybe. Sounds human? Exactly. What we lost. The reality is, they're gone. We'll never see a Denisovan poet. Never hear a Neanderthal orchestra. Never watch a Homo erectus documentary, made by them, for them. We're the only ones left. And while that's given us the stage, it's also left us alone. We carry their stories, but not their voices. One last thought. If they were still here, we might be less arrogant. We'd be reminded daily. We're not the peak of evolution. We're just one branch on a wild, tangled tree. And maybe, just maybe, we'd be better off for it. Let's rewind. Tens of thousands of years ago, before cities, before empires, before history itself, Homo sapiens weren't alone. They walked side by side with other human species. But here's the big question. Did they know? Did they realize they were sharing the planet with beings like them, but not quite them? Let's break it down. There's no doubt they met. We've found Neanderthal DNA in modern humans. We know they interbred not just once, but multiple times across generations. That doesn't happen by accident. These weren't shadowy encounters in the dark. This was contact, prolonged, intimate, undeniable. So yes, they knew. But what did they think? Mirror or monster? Imagine it, you stumble across another tribe deep in the forest. But these people are off. Thicker brows, different speech, odd customs. They're not animals, but they're not fully you either. Did our ancestors see them as kin? As rivals? As gods? Anthropologists have debated this for decades. And while we'll never know exactly what they thought, cave art and burial sites offer hints. In some regions, Neanderthals and sapiens shared tools, fire, and territory. That doesn't scream hostile. It suggests cooperation. In others, we find wounds, evidence of violence, maybe even genocide. So maybe it depended on where you were and what was at stake. Our ancestors didn't leave behind books, but they did tell stories. Oral traditions passed from voice to voice, generation to generation. And it's possible, just possible, that tales of the others survived in myth long after they vanished. Think about it. Myths of forest people, stories of giants, hairy mountain dwellers, wild men with fire in their eyes. Could some of those be distorted memories of Neanderthals? Denisovans? We'll never prove it. But the timing lines up, and so does the psychology. Humans remember what scares them and what fascinates them. The other humans would have done both. Here's a truth people overlook. Our ancestors weren't stone-faced survival machines. They felt. They grieved. They formed attachments. So imagine this. You're a sapiens child, raised by a Denisovan stepmother. Or you're a Neanderthal boy watching sapiens take over your hunting lands. The feelings, real. The confusion, massive. The trauma, deep. Some may have loved the others. Some may have feared them. Some may have hated them. But no one was indifferent. Because when someone almost like you shows up, you can't look away. Here's what seals it. The DNA is still with us. Neanderthal traits influence our immune systems. Sleep cycle 7, how we process pain. That means sapiens didn't just know them. They accepted them into their tribes, their beds, their bloodlines. You don't do that unless, on some level, you recognize the other as one of you. Not a beast. Not an enemy. But something in between. Something human. Our ancestors may not have had words like species or evolution, but they had eyes, they had minds, they had hearts, and they absolutely knew they weren't alone. That realization must have shaken them, but it also expanded their world. And maybe, just maybe, it taught them what it means to be human by meeting others who were too. What if I told you we could resurrect another human species? Not just in theory, not sci-fi. Real science, right now. Thanks to ancient DNA, gene editing, and rapid leaps in synthetic biology, we're on the edge of making it happen. But here's the real kicker. Just because we can, doesn't mean we should. Let's dive into the science and the madness of bringing back extinct humans. Neanderthals, Denisovans, maybe even Homo floresiensis. We've sequenced their genomes. We have the genetic blueprint, the instruction manual, for building another kind of human. CRISPR and other gene editing tools could, in theory, modify a human embryo to express those ancient genes. Piece by piece, scientists could reconstruct traits like heavy brows, broader rib cages, or enhanced oxygen usage. We're talking real-life Jurassic Park, but with people. Sounds wild? It is, but it's not impossible. In labs right now, they're already doing this kind of gene tinkering with animals. So what's stopping us? Imagine growing up as a Neanderthal in a modern world. Not a clone, a sentient being, human, but not like the rest. You're treated as a science project. Poked, studied, filmed, judged. Where do you belong? Would they have rights, citizenship, protection under human law? These aren't just hypotheticals. They're moral landmines. And here's the thing. You can't undo it. Once you bring them back, they're here, living, breathing, feeling. Is it fair to pull them out of extinction just to satisfy our curiosity? Or worse, our egos? Let's not pretend the world is noble. If we revived a Neanderthal, the headlines would explode. Media frenzy, documentaries, Netflix specials. But under the spotlight, would that being become a person or just a sideshow? History's full of examples where the different were exploited. What makes us think we'd do better this time? Even with the best intentions, we're walking a tightrope between scientific wonder and ethical disaster. Some argue, if we can bring back the woolly mammoth, why not Neanderthals? They see it as redemption, a chance to right a wrong, to restore something nature lost, maybe even something we helped destroy. Others dream bigger. What if Neanderthals had cognitive abilities we've lost? What if Denisovans had physical traits we could learn from? Super endurance, disease resistance, cold adaptation. People imagine designer humans, evolved hybrids, bio-enhanced capabilities. It's seductive, powerful, dangerous. Because when science meets ambition without boundaries, History gets rewritten, fast. What do we owe them? Maybe the better question isn't can we or should we, but what do we owe them? We outlasted them, maybe even played a role in their extinction. Do we now bear responsibility? Is revival a way to honor them or exploit them? Would they want to come back to our world? A world of pollution, war, surveillance, and social media? Would it feel like resurrection or punishment? This isn't just about test tubes and DNA strands. It's about identity, empathy, limits. Reviving an extinct human species could be the boldest leap science has ever taken, or the most reckless. And maybe the biggest question of all is this: what kind of humans are we becoming if we dare to bring others back? The past is whispering. The future is waiting. And the decision? It's in our hands. They didn't die off randomly. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Erectus, Naledi, Floresiensis, each one walked this earth. Each one thrived in their time. Until they didn't. The question is why them, not us? That answer isn't just buried in the past. It's staring us dead in the face, because it's about our future too. These extinct humans weren't weak. Neanderthals had bigger brains than us. Denisovans dominated high altitudes. Homo erectus lasted longer than any human species in history. Yet they're all gone. Why? It wasn't about strength. It wasn't about intelligence. It was about adaptability. The Earth shifted. Climates changed. Ecosystems collapsed. And when that happened, the ones who couldn't bend broke. That's the brutal truth. So what gave us, Homo sapiens, the edge? It wasn't just tools or fire or sharper spears. It was connection. We built bigger social groups. We collaborated. We shared knowledge. We told stories, passed on wisdom, formed communities. Culture became our superpower. It helped us survive droughts, famines, predators, and each other. But here's the twist. That same culture now threatens to destroy us. Are we repeating their mistakes? We dominate the planet, but domination comes with a price. We're pushing ecosystems to their limits, ignoring warning signs, chasing short-term gain over long-term survival. Sound familiar? The other species didn't die in a single dramatic moment. It was a slow collapse. Food sources dwindled, habitats shrank. They didn't adapt fast enough. And today, we're facing the same pattern, just with Wi-Fi. Climate change, overpopulation, AI disruption, global instability. We think we're safe because we're advanced. But extinction doesn't care how advanced you are. What if those extinct humans are more than a scientific curiosity? What if they're a mirror? A reminder that even the most dominant species can fall. A warning that survival isn't guaranteed. We're not immune to the laws of nature. We're just temporarily ahead of them. So maybe the final gift these ancient cousins give us is the urgency to evolve again mentally, emotionally, culturally. Not to become stronger, but wiser. You've just walked through time. Not just millions of years in the past, but through the minds, lives, and deaths of those who came before. The others, the forgotten, the almost humans, the ones who shared this planet with us and didn't make it. They weren't failures. They were experiments of nature, stories cut short, and warnings etched in bone. So here's the real takeaway. Their extinction is not just history. It's prophecy unless we choose differently. We're the last ones standing, for now. But the same forces that erased them, environmental chaos, tribalism, complacency, are circling again. And this time, we're the ones holding the pen. If this journey shook something inside you, good. That was the point. Because this isn't just about ancient bones in dusty museums. This is about us, our choices, our next chapter. The clock is still ticking, so ask yourself, what kind of ancestors will we be? What legacy will we leave? And will someone thousands of years from now dig us up and ask, why didn't they make it? If this story made you think, Kevin, for a second, don't let it stop here. Hit subscribe, because this series is just getting started. The next chapter of our past might be the key to our future, and you're going to want to be here when we uncover it. Because extinction isn't just something that happened, it's something that's still possible. Unless we write a different ending. Together,